Welcome back to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast. Today we welcome Tabbin Almond. Tabbin is a coach, a speaker, podcaster, and author of the book Bottling Up Trouble: How Alcohol is Harming Your Business and What to Do About It. Having trained with Annie Grace to become a This Naked Mind coach, Tabbin now works with individuals and organisations to challenge the role that alcohol plays in our lives, particularly in workplace culture. But her journey with alcohol is a deeply personal one. Following her own experience with breast cancer, Tabbin began questioning the lack of clear guidance around alcohol and cancer risk, something that ultimately changed her relationship with alcohol and led her into coaching. In this conversation, we're going to explore the intersections between alcohol, health, and performance, the cultural blind spots that still exist around drinking, and what it really takes to step out of what we call middle lane drinking. Tabbin, it's lovely to see you again. Welcome to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to this.
So, for those who may be unfamiliar, with your story and with your work, could you talk us through your journey with alcohol? From growing up to right now where you are, right, how you are now.
Yeah, sure. Well, for anybody listening and hoping for a really spectacular rock bottom story, I'm afraid I haven't got one. But my story is so familiar to lots of the people that I coach. It was growing up in a family where alcohol was completely normal. My dad was a farmer, and he used to sort of kick off his wellies as he came in the evening and say, "Oh, what a day! I need a drink." And so I just grew up with this idea that adults need drinks, and they were obviously alcoholic ones. My parents brewed their own beer, which I never actually got on with. I mean, it was just filthy stuff, but they drank a lot of it. They also would drink quite a lot of wine, quite a lot of anything alcoholic, actually. And thinking back, I don't think I consciously knew of any adults who didn't drink alcohol. It was just totally normalized. And I remember when I went to university that some of the guys, I did a lot of sport at uni, and you all sort of hang around together, and the people say, "Oh, you can drink like a man." And I thought, yeah, go me. That's I didn't really realize that was maybe not such a good thing. Um, but I would regularly. We had this weird thing where everybody who was in any sort of sports team would do a 10-mile run on a Sunday morning. I was a sprinter and a hurdler at the time. I really didn't need to be doing 10-mile runs, and I certainly didn't need to be doing them on a hangover. And I would just routinely throw up and then carry on. And I just didn't really make the connection that, my boozing and my sporting performance kind of, if I cut back on one, I would improve the other. That wasn't taking it that seriously. And then I studied French. I spent a year in Cognac, which maybe didn't help. I was like a really enthusiastic social drinker, but never thought I had a problem. Um, and then when I left university, I went into advertising, and advertising still is pretty boozy. Back then, we were talking about the early 80s, it really was very, very boozy. And I was in the most sort of boozy area in that I was a media planner and buyer. So all of the media owners who wanted me to spend my clients' money with them would wine and dine me. And actually, having good relationships with the media owners was important. And so I was out to lunch in every sense of the word, probably 4 to 5 days a week,
Speak
then
through
drinking.
Mad Men.
Yeah, it
Was it like
it
that?
it was pretty like that. All of the board directors had fridges in their office, and it was yeah. With the last agency I was at before we moved to Devon, we had a bar, and it was called the gym, so that you could say to your other half, "I'm sorry, I might be late home. I'm going to go to the gym after work." Like, it
Oh,
was so
that's great.
brazen.
I love that. That's great.
Uh, um, and then I was aware that maybe my drinking was a bit different to other people's. That I seemed to be like, if we were at dinner at somebody's house and the wine got stuck at the end of the table, I would become agitated by that and sort of
Yeah.
spend my time thinking of how do I get the wine down this end without it making obvious. So I'd say, "Oh, shall I top everybody up?" Thinking, "Oh, there's enough in this bottle for me too." All of
Telltale sign
those
that.
things. Yeah. Um, And then I had 2 children, was absolutely fine during pregnancy, had no desire to drink, found it really easy to stop. So I kind of told myself, well, I must be okay. And then we moved back to Devon, which is where I'm from, in the kids were 4 and 6, and my husband was working abroad a lot. I was on my own. It was quite different to being in London because uh, I wasn't working. I was doing sort of freelance work and from home, but I didn't have that structure of going to the office, coming home. And I was at home, he was away a lot. I was at home with 2 small children. So I just started drinking in the evenings on my own, just because I'd always drunk a bit. And when you're on your own, it's really easy to, it's like the brakes come off a bit, or they did for me. And I was routinely drinking a bottle of wine a night easily. And then when John came home, I would do things like, if he was drinking red, I would drink white, but I'd have some of his red when he wasn't all of these little games. So by the early 2000s, I was thinking, I really need to do something about this. And back then, there wasn't the range of options that there is now. I remember being in the States and buying a couple of books and thinking, oh, great. And then they just didn't really speak to me. They were very based in the AA methodology. I then thought, okay, I need to try harder. I went to AA, did it for 2 years, never got anywhere. Just, I remember my sponsor saying to me, your problem is you're still in denial. I'm not in denial. I'm here. I'm clearly not in denial. But the fact of the matter is, I feel very uncomfortable standing up in front of a room of people saying, hello, my name's Tabbin. I'm an alcoholic. My brain says, I want to know what the definition of an alcoholic is before I identify as one. And as we all know, it's really, it's not a binary thing. And it's not to do with how much you're drinking or how often or what you're drinking or whether you've had this spectacular rock bottom. It's to do with how much headspace it's taking up. And so I stopped doing AA. I then read Alan Carr's book, The Easy Way to Control Alcohol. And I loved the word easy, and I loved the word
Easy
control.
control.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's for me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that actually, I mean, you guys and I are trained in a very, very similar methodology.
Yeah,
And it's about rewiring our subconscious.
absolutely.
And that's what Alan Carr is doing as well. And it made a lot of sense. And then I did he has some hypnotherapists. I went to one of them for a day, had a one-on-one session for a day, which was, I remember it cost about £800 or something, which seemed a heck of a lot of money. But I worked out it wouldn't take very long for me to see a return on that investment. And that really 100% worked for over 7 years. And I just thought, and I didn't even think about alcohol. I wasn't preachy to anybody else who drank. I just thought, you do you, I'll do me, not interested. And really thought I'd cracked it. And then this is where the breast cancer story comes in. I'd gone through a pretty shitty time, to be honest. Marriage fell apart, loads of financial problems. The breast cancer diagnosis, which is another story in itself, we can come back to if you like. But so I had the initial surgery, and they they tested my lymph nodes. They tested 7. And then when I went back like 10 days later for an assessment of the surgery and for the test results, they said, oh, we unfortunately found that the cancer was in all 7 of the lymph nodes that we tested and in a high count. We need to see where it's spread to. Now, I don't know if those are the words they use, but that's what I heard. I was shit scared, really scared. And I was with my daughter, who was an adult. She was like 21, and my brother. And we went home that evening, and they opened a bottle of wine, which was very normal for them. And I just said, I'll have some. And it was like one of those Bateman cartoon things. I was aware that they were looking at each other, but I'd just been given the most horrendous news. I was terrified. I thought, I'm going to die and I'm going to leave my kids, because their father he wasn't very well mentally. He was in Australia. Things weren't good. I'm just going to leave these poor young people floundering. And I was scared for myself, but more scared for them. And I just did not want to be in my head. And, looking back, I can see completely that I had done a pretty good job rewiring my subconscious. But when emotions get really tough, as they did that night, my go-to was still, let's use alcohol as the sticking plaster here. Don't want to face this. Um, and but unfortunately, once you're back in the groove, you're back drinking. Now, I didn't drink a load, because I was literally, the next day I was back in hospital having scans and more surgery and a lot of surgery, and eventually chemo and radiotherapy and stuff. So, and as anybody who knows who's had chemo, you don't really feel like eating or drinking much at all during that. But once I was better, I was back in that pattern of drinking. The issue for me was then that most people thought I didn't drink because I'd spent 7 years not drinking. So what I would do is go for a meal with friends or something, maybe have a glass of wine with my dinner or something, and everyone, people thought, oh, she just drinks occasionally, she has the odd glass. The bit they didn't know was that I would come home and then open a bottle and neck it before I went to bed. So I was in a sort of very lonely pattern of drinking by that stage. And if there was a sort of rock bottom, it was one Christmas, which must have been Christmas of 2017, when we finished work, and I came home, and my kids were coming home the next day, and I was sort of like wrapping last of the Christmas presents and having a glass of wine and then another one, and then I got into that thing of, oh, well, I'll just tidy up all the odds and sods of alcohol that are around. There's a bit of sherry in there and a little bit of port here, and I've no idea what I drank. I know there was a wine box involved, and I finished that off, and I just was like, and I went to bed really very drunk, I think. Woke up feeling awful, and sort of had some coffee and some more coffee, and then the kids arrived, and my son, I went to the door and open the door, and he just took one look at me and said, "You are hanging, aren't you, mother?" And I went, "Oh, you can tell." And it was a real sort of shock moment. And they were really sweet. And they said, "Well, we'll get on with the prep of Christmas lunch, and you take a dog for a walk." So I took a dog for a walk, and we have this very sweet tradition. One of the pubs in the village, there are two pubs, and one of them has a Father Christmas comes for all the dogs in the village on Christmas Eve. So you go to the pub on Christmas Eve at lunchtime, and there's Father Christmas, and every dog gets given a bone or whatever. And I took him for a walk, and I went into the pub to do that. And I thought, I'm going to throw up. It was really hot, really noisy, crowded, lots of dogs all overexcited and barking. And so I came home, and he never got his present from Father Christmas because I was too hungover to be in the pub. And that was like a moment. And it's a really silly little thing, but I am not that person. This alcohol is taking a heck of a lot from me. There's a whole bunch of people in there who I really like, would have loved to spend a couple of hours with, instead of which, and I should have been ahead of the prep, and the kids should be here as well. I've completely messed up this entire day because I got drunk last night. And it was just I don't think I want to keep doing this. And that's around then that I started Googling, am I an alcoholic? Kind of know the answer. Yeah. Even though I didn't like the term alcoholic, we all know kind of it's shorthand for am I in trouble? Yeah. And somewhere later I came across this Naked Mind, and if anybody's ever come across them, once you're on their marketing list, you don't leave it. And I think there was some wise bit of me that said, you need this, don't hit unsubscribe. And at some point, particularly hungover one morning, I clicked buy on doing a 3-month course. And that was, I remember the next day thinking, all that buyer's remorse, and this is a bunch of, sharp salesmen in the States. You probably won't even see anything for your money. You've just been conned, all of that sort of stuff. But I hadn't been conned. It was the best money I've ever spent. I did that course. I was very lucky. It was the very early days of This Naked Mind. And so Annie Grace was my coach. So I got to know
Wow.
her really well. And yeah, the absolute sort of game-changing moment for me was discovering that alcohol is a known cause of cancer, and particularly of breast cancer. And I literally had not known that. I had actually asked my consultant, my oncologist, what do I need to do to stay cancer free, and was told, oh, eat healthily and take a reasonable amount of exercise. No mention of alcohol, which infuriates me to this day.
It's
I
shocking, really is.
literally asked for the information, I wasn't given it. So I had no idea. And when Annie was going through the sort of the health side of, what alcohol does to us, and she mentioned cancer, and I was going, sorry, what? She said, yeah, go and look at the World Health Organization website. And I did. What the heck? Really? And so for me, that was a bit of information which was never going to leave my brain. And I sat in a restaurant with my daughter the night before we were going to walk the moonwalk, which is like a marathon distance walk through the streets of London in aid of breast cancer charities. And we were having supper the night before, and I can picture it now. It was an Italian restaurant. I had a glass of Pinot Grigio, and I drank some of it, and it wasn't tasting nice, but not as in there's something wrong with this wine. It was more, I don't like this anymore. And I remember saying to Lucy, do you want some of it? And she went, why? What's the matter with it? And I went, I think I'm done. I just don't think I want anymore. And that was it. That was the 12th of May, 2018. Well, it was the 11th of May because the 12th of May was my first whole day of what's turned into now an 8-year stretch. And the desire just had gone, which makes it sound like spontaneous sobriety. It wasn't. It was about 25 years in the making. But that for me was the final bit of information that made the difference for me. Yeah. So a couple of years later, I found myself training to be a coach. Yeah. And the rest is history, as they say.
Thank you, Tabbin, for sharing that, because I know that's a deeply personal story, and really appreciate your honesty and bringing that onto the podcast today. I mean, it still staggers me how little awareness there is between alcohol and cancer, because cancer's deeply touched my family. I lost my mum to cancer in 2007, and I don't ever recall there being a conversation about alcohol at all. And yes, it was 2007, but it was nearly 20 years on from when we realized there was a connection. Why do you think there is such a lack of awareness around alcohol and cancer?
I mean, I think at two levels. Firstly, we don't tell people. Funnily enough, later on today, I'm recording a podcast episode with a lady called Dr. Erin Hobin, who is an academic in Canada. And she led a study into the impact of labelling on people's information and understanding about alcohol. And they proved unequivocally that if we were to have labels that warned people, people would be more aware, and it would lead to fewer people drinking and everybody drinking a bit less. At the moment, there's just zero awareness. And my own mum died of cancer as well, which is undoubtedly related to her drinking and smoking. She was a heavy smoker until the last 4 or 5 years of her life, and a heavy drinker for most of her life as well. And she died of esophageal cancer, which is horrible. It's a really, really nasty way to die. And alcohol the combination of alcohol and tobacco was definitely a factor in that, was never mentioned. Now, she was in her 80s, maybe, maybe there's no point. But I think that the public information is really, really poor. That's the first thing. I think it should be labeled on all alcohol labels. The only health risk that people really know about alcohol is that it can harm their liver. People they're not really aware of the cancer risks, they're not aware of the cardiovascular risks, of the increased risk of dementia, and the mental health aspect as well. They're just sort of like, we have an epidemic of poor mental health, and yet the causation of alcohol being used to help with the things which it actually exacerbates, that's kind of not discussed enough. But I think the other thing that I don't really understand wholly is the medical world's reticence to call alcohol out. And I think it's a cultural thing. And after I'd found out, I went to my next oncologist trip. I said, by the way, I've got a bone to pick with you. I asked you outright what I should do to stay cancer free. You told me to eat healthily and take reasonable amount of exercise. You did not mention the fact that alcohol is a known risk. And I said, either you didn't know it, in which case that is truly shocking, or you decided deliberately to withhold that information from me. Which is it? And she said, well, we don't like to judge or shame patients. The judging is on your part. If I knew and still decided to drink anyway, maybe you've got grounds to judge me. But I didn't know. So I think there is a lot. I mean, we always have this joke, don't we? Sort of, as long as I drink less than my doctor, I'm all right. But I think there is an element.
There's something in that.
Yeah.
There's definitely something in that.
Yeah. I think there is a sort of fear of being seen as a hypocrite thing. Yeah. And that's where I think we need to remove the shame, stigma, blame around developing a problem with alcohol. The bottom line is that anybody who drinks enough of this blinking stuff risks becoming addicted to it. And it's not a character defect or a weakness or a personal failing. And if we could move away from that line of thinking, then I think it would be much easier for the medical world to kind of share the information. But to my mind, this should be on posters in hospitals. If you're sitting waiting for hours in the oncology unit, there should be some posters saying alcohol is a known cause of cancer.
Yeah.
If you would like some help addressing your own drinking patterns, here's some numbers to call, people to speak to, books to read, whatever. But it's just like not mentioned.
It makes me so angry. It really does, because I came from my upbringing around alcohol was very, very similar. My parents both drank. They loved to drink. They brewed wine at home. Very, very, very similar to what you're hearing. But the fact it was never mentioned, and we'll never know that. My mum wasn't a massive heavy drinker. She loved a brandy and ginger ale, and she loved to drink. But we'll never ever know that, and it makes me so angry, because I can kind of get it when it comes to the government. There's a reason behind it, right? There's money behind it. Big alcohol's at play. There's money, but why on earth in the health service we're just not mentioning it? And you will sit in a waiting room, but there'll be leaflets talking about AA, there'll be leaflets that talk about help around alcohol, but never about the actual risks themselves. It's and
it's always aimed at alcoholics as well, isn't it, as opposed to middle lane drinkers?
Exactly.
Yes.
It's about severe alcohol use disorder, as opposed to the 80% of the population that are just merrily drinking day in, day out and aren't blissfully unaware of the downsides. And you make the comparison with something like cigarettes, and I know we've kind of quoted it before on this podcast, but I think there was a study that came out from Alcohol Change UK a couple of years ago, and it quoted the percentage of 13% of people, when asked, were aware of the risk, or aware of the link with alcohol and cancer. And if you juxtapose that with cigarettes and you ask people, are you aware of the link between cigarettes and cancer? It would be in the 90s, you know, if not 100.
I would think it's got to be
Yeah,
100,
so
isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
it's the fact that you don't even need to put the ingredients on a bottle of, you know, a bottle of alcohol, let alone the health impacts. I mean, it's just nuts. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever when you look at it practically.
And we know that packaging makes a difference. I mean, I worked in advertising most of my career, and the health warnings on cigarettes, you know, if you look at the awareness data, it just goes up and up and up. And in the first year, some people, it just grows and grows and grows until it's at, you know, sort of statistically probably 100% now awareness. And, you know, that alone doesn't account for the decline in smoking. I think that the cost of cigarettes, and the duty on cigarettes has been a big factor. But I simply don't buy the arguments, and even the argument about the government does make revenue from the tax on alcohol sales, but that revenue that they make is dwarfed by the amount that is paid out to treat people for diseases and illnesses that are caused by alcohol. Now, the trouble is that they get the revenue this year, but the person's problem with alcohol won't develop for 10 or 15 years. And so there is a gap. But surely the job of government is to do a bit of future planning.
Well, I guess that if you're a politician, you're absolutely right. That's what it should be. But the reality is, the top of the priority list for any politician is to stay in power. And if you're saying to people, okay, right, we're going to bring in all of these draconian measures around alcohol that the public are not going to like, then the chances are you're not going to be in that. You're not going to get re-elected. You're not going to be there in 10 years when you realise the benefits. And that's where the system's broken.
Yeah.
You're right. If those financial benefits were realised a year later, then I'm pretty sure it would have happened. But you know, you're probably going to be you're not going to get elected if you're putting these sort of things across.
And you know, with the state of our sort of political world here in the UK at the moment, you know, the decisions are more and more short term, which is a great shame. But at some point, I mean, we did have the legislation for in Ireland,
It got pulled, didn't it?
And it got pulled, and it had got to a stage where there were bottles on shelf with the warnings, and then it got pulled and kicked down the can for another 2 years. And here, our government has said they're theoretically in a consultation phase. I don't get what there is to consult about.
Well, and I'm wondering how much of that consultation phase is taking place in the bars of the House of Commons.
Yeah.
Do
you know what though, Tabbin? We had I don't like to name drop it here, but we had friend of the show, Catherine Gray, on a few weeks ago, and she was hinting at that she knows somebody who's kind of quite a significant position of power, who basically had told her off the record that something quite dramatic was coming with regards to alcohol. She kind of alluded it to be around. She wouldn't say specifically what it was, but she said it was something around sort of, she hinted at not just labeling, but something bigger and wider reaching than that. And she was extremely excited about what this thing was that was coming, but we couldn't quite eke it out of her. But she said, this is going to change everything. It's coming very soon. It's going to change everything. And we were like, wow. So we're kind of waiting with bated breath to see what that is.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's no single solution, but I think that the fact that somebody can, when I had treatment for the best part of a year, I hate to think what I cost the NHS during that year. I mean, thousands and thousands of pounds. And there are women like me every day who are leaving hospital thinking, got through that by the skin of my teeth, back to normal. And normal includes alcohol. And by drinking, they are increasing their risk of the cancer coming back. And that's just nonsense. That really should not be happening. And you've got kids growing up without parents and grandparents and aunties. And just because somebody's saying, oh, we don't want to embarrass patients. It's just nonsense, isn't it? Yeah.
It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, we're right behind you on all of that. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, you know, whatsoever. If you wouldn't mind, we might just pivoting quickly onto, you know, what you're doing now around workplace culture and alcohol, because I'm so behind this. I mean, your book, Bottling Up Trouble, has been doing really well. And, I read it when I
Yeah.
was on holiday last year, and I took so much inspiration from this. Could you give us like a brief summary of what the book's about, so people who are not familiar with it can get an understanding?
Yeah, I mean, if the sort of subtitle is How Alcohol is Harming Your Business and What You Can Do About It. Um, so it's really addressing this kind of, I call it the Wellbeing Blind Spot, where businesses, organizations, and so I say organizations because there's a lot of, the police force or the medical world. It's not just commercial businesses, but workplaces often actively encourage people to drink and or facilitate it and or turn a blind eye to it. So advertising was probably at the extreme end, but the research I've done shows that any business where there's a client relationship, a sort of client supplier relationship, where the decision to retain that supplier is predicated on some fairly kind of subjective measures, entertaining and inverted commas building relationships becomes a really big part of it, and alcohol is totally embedded in that. So taking the clients to see the rugby and having a good time. And I can remember being told early on in my career, you drink, you keep up with the clients, and you always go to bed after them. So it's basically thou shalt get pissed. Now, don't get me wrong, I was not complaining at that at all, but but that was the rule. And you don't make clients feel embarrassed about the fact that they're drinking a lot. Now, those clients are, probably on a weekend pass, and they're thinking, right, I'm going to get my money's worth from the agency, and my wife's not here. It doesn't matter, and so you're being actively encouraged to drink, but it's also kind of like a culture of, yeah, great. And the sort of stories after Christmas parties or awards dues where so got so drunk they couldn't remember their own name, and all of, there were so many stories of really bad behavior at work Christmas dues or awards dues. And people kind of being celebrated for it. Oh, you should have seen the state of him or her. And I had a colleague who made it into work the day after a Christmas party, but severely hungover, and she curled up under her desk next to a radiator. That radiator was then turned on high. She was out of it, basically all but passed out underneath her desk. And when she sort of woke up / came to, she had a red burn mark across her cheek.
Oh God, really?
Yeah. Somebody else who wet themselves in the office the morning after a party because she was still so drunk.
Oh
And
God.
those stories are kind of bandied around and funny, but they're not. And they're, and it's sort of that culture of celebrating kind of debauched behavior. And it's always at somebody else's expense. So it's not particularly kind humour. And certainly in advertising, I remember once a colleague, I'd been out at a client meeting and came back into the agency, and it was the Thursday before Christmas. So it's quite a typical day that people go out and have a few beers at lunchtime. And one of my colleagues was in reception, kind of being held up by a couple of others, talking to the MD, who turned a blind eye to the fact that he was so drunk he couldn't stand up and that he had vomit on his shoes. And it was like, and you said, this is just a really weird world where we're kind of saying this is okay. And so the culture in workplaces is just contributing to the problem. And, in the advertising world, there were free bars in most agencies. Quite a few still have them. If you've got a free bar every evening from 5 till 8 p.m., you're probably going to go and have a beer or two. It's just, and there's this sort of myth that alcohol helps us to bond because we've used it as a bonding agent, but we're perfectly able to bond without it.
Of course we are, yeah.
But it's just these sort of kind of inherited wisdoms in inverted commas, so they're not wise at all. But so that's, and I realized as I started coaching that a lot of my clients were in similar position to me, that their drinking had really taken off with work. The other thing is, a lot of the time with workplace drinking, you're not even paying for it. It's all on expenses.
That's part of the problem, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you're going to drink more when it's free.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
the amount of Christmas parties I've been to where people are like, I'll have two of those. People are double parked because it's free, and it's like if you're on a plane and someone gives you a glass of champagne. Oh, yeah, I'm having that because it's free. It's like the whole all inclusive kind of mindset, isn't it? You're just going to drink more if you give it to people for nothing, and then you're incurring all these potential HR issues that come further down the line that you're creating. I'm probably stealing your thunder a bit here, Tabbin, but
totally,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's just a recipe for disaster.
It is, and it's sort of the HR issues that arise from Christmas parties. I mean, I've not ever worked in HR, but I've spoken to a lot of HR people since. So you get that, but you also get this thing where people are just underperforming. So you get the very obvious examples where something bad happens and can directly be attributed to the fact somebody got very drunk. That to me is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. You have absenteeism, where people just are too hungover to show up. And when I published the book, I commissioned Ipsos Mori to do some research for me. And we found that 12% of the sample, which was robust, it was a 2,000 people sample, 12% of people had been off with a hangover at least 3 times in the past year. And only 7% of anybody who'd been off with a hangover told the truth about why they were off.
Yeah.
So employers are kind of thinking it's not an issue. It's not showing up in our stats. They're saying it won't show up in your stats because people won't tell the truth. We're in the land of porky pies here because people feel that they will be judged, possibly even reprimanded, possibly even lose their job if they tell the truth. So they just don't. So there are lots of, I've got to take the dog to the vet or whatever.
I'm chomping at the bit here in terms of I've not, when I say I haven't worked in HR, I've worked in restaurant operations. I was in hospitality for 30 plus years, and I worked in restaurant operations, which involves a lot of HR issues. And I will obviously not name any companies here, but it's probably long enough back now that I recall a time where we were taken to Paris for our Christmas lunch, a day trip on the Eurostar to Paris. And the directors from the business were in such a state that one of them got off at Calais on the way back, thinking that they were home. Another one was thrown off the train for urinating in the bar. And these were directors that I had to put down on an appeal at a later date for someone who was being disciplined for for an employee that was being disciplined for stepping over the line at a Christmas party.
Yeah.
So I had to discipline those people, and I had to put the name of these particular people down as an appeal for what they'd done. And this was so actively encouraged. It was ingrained. I do think it's changed a little bit
changing,
in hospitality. And I am going back quite a while now. And I do think there have been changes. I'm talking probably 15, 20 years ago. So in my most recent employer, it was very different. We would still be taken away on trips, but laid on by wine suppliers. But I guess that kind of comes with the territory of working in that industry. But the HR side of it blows my mind, and how quickly it's just.
But I think even though it is changing, and it definitely is changing, there is still a fairly sizable group of people who were in their 20s or 30s 15 to 20 years ago, who are now in real difficulty with alcohol and don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So, maybe in another 20 to 30 years, there will be far fewer of them and it'll be much less of an issue. But at the moment, there is this big group of people who are either not showing up for work because they're hungover and they're having to make up excuses, or they're showing up, this sort of presenteeism thing, but they're far from in showroom condition, shall we say? They're pretty shabby, and the IAS study that they did a little while ago, but it's showing that those people self-reported as being 39% less productive when hungover, just from themselves. And then there's a ripple effect on the people that work with them, who are having to kind of carry them. And mistakes happen. If you are, I mean, it's relatively unusual for people to be drunk at work now, but it happens. But certainly a lot of people will still have some alcohol in their system and be very jaded and hungover, and we can make mistakes.
That's the bit that really
Yeah.
sticks out to me, is the presenteeism. When I think back to when I was at my peak of my drinking, when I was throughout my 30s, when I worked in London, I don't ever remember really calling in sick for whatever reason, if I was hungover. But I always used to drag my ass into the office and literally just sit there on Facebook eating bacon sandwiches,
Yeah.
making tea, and that was it. It did nothing, honestly,
Yeah.
for days on end, because my job, like yours, Tabbin, was kind of, and Steve's was kind of quite social, and there was a lot of evening work, if you like, which didn't really feel like work, because you were just going out and getting pissed with clients, and
Yeah.
if there were clients that you were quite friendly with, it was just felt like a bit of fun. But yeah, the next day I just just do nothing, literally do nothing, sit there and just social media, and and that's what really sticks in my mind, is the amount of time that I just wasted
Yeah.
because of presenteeism, and no one was any the wiser.
And I think that having those conversations with employers to say, do you realize how much money you're leaving on the table by perpetuating this culture? And there are other things, if you've got a culture where senior managers are all quite boozy and stuff, if you think about what that feels like to a Gen Z who's joining, who maybe doesn't drink, they don't have much respect for those guys.
No, I've seen that
yeah.
firsthand.
And so it's damaging to you as a sort of employer brand, because people are thinking, I don't really want to work for these dinosaurs. It's not my vibe. So it becomes harder to attract people, harder to retain people. And there's also the sort of diversity and inclusion side of things.
Definitely.
There are, quite apart from young women who may be trying to get pregnant or in the early stages of pregnancy, it's nobody else's business. They don't want to drink. But where you get, I interviewed a young Muslim girl for the book, who super clever, read law at Cambridge, joined one of the, I think they call them the Magic Circle companies, and they take on like 50 with a view to keeping 20 or something. And the people who get retained are, they describe it as best fit. Best fit means, are you going out for drinks with the boss when invited? She was Muslim. She was not going out for drinks. She didn't want to be in the pub. She knew that she wouldn't be retained. And sure enough, she wasn't. But those sort of things are, that shouldn't be happening now. But it's interesting even that, how some of the sort of more traditional firms will go around the top universities, and they call it the milk round, and they go around and try to recruit the brightest people to go and work for them. And I was talking to somebody who's currently at university about a particular company that this person's at Oxford University. They rocked up at Oxford and did the, sort of, we've got champagne or red or white wine. And this girl said, have you got anything soft? And I said, we've got some orange juice. And she was given like a glass of warm orange juice. Actually, if that's how they treat people from the get-go, I don't think I want to work there.
No.
So just, they're unaware of the speed with which things are changing. Yeah. And unimaginative as well. I mean, there are so many other ways to encourage people to get to know each other and to bond that don't need to involve alcohol.
Do you think to some extent it's almost a generational thing as well now, because obviously we're all aware of the statistics around how younger people are drinking way less for whatever reason? I think there's various reasons for it, but if you kind of look at if you look at a bit of an organizational chart, and you've got the MD at the top, and then you've got the directors, if they are naturally people who are in their maybe their 40s and 50s of our generation, who are probably who are statistically people who are drinking more, we know that. It kind of cascades down, doesn't it? Because if the MD's doing it, the directors are going to do it. And if the directors are doing it, then senior managers are going to feel like they need to do it. And then the senior managers obviously impact, the workforce. And it has this kind of cascade effect down from the top, doesn't it? It all starts with senior leadership and the culture that's set within the organisation by the leadership team.
Yeah. And I think also when it comes to senior leadership team, another factor that I feel really strongly about is that some of those people will no longer drink. We know that. If you go to AA meetings in central London, you'll see some of them. And I've coached some of them, but they don't feel empowered to say to the rest of the board, look, I think that we should be a little bit more open about this and say to people that here in this organisation, we will help people who are struggling rather than vilify them and fire them.
Demonise them.
Because that, we're unique here in England, because I'm not sure if it's England or the UK, but certainly in England, you can be fired for having a problem with alcohol if it's affecting your work. It's not they call it a protected characteristic, and it's not a protected characteristic here. So if you've got stress or anxiety or depression, you can't be fired for that, because it's a medical condition and it's a protected characteristic. So the employer has to look after you, can't fire you. They may not be super kind, but there's a legal requirement they look after you. When it comes to alcohol, you can just be fired. And when this came up, in the House of Commons, and somebody said, this doesn't make sense, and this is under the Tory government, and they said it's a lifestyle choice. I think, how effing ignorant are you? It's just,
they said with glass of wine in hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Being propped up as they voted on it. So I think that there is a role for all of us as coaches, really, to kind of empower those people who are in business to say, actually, I used to have a problem with alcohol. I don't have one anymore, but it threatened my happiness and my health and my livelihood. I was able to do something about it. And if anybody else is in the same position, come and talk to me, and I'll make sure that you get the help that you need. Because paying £4,000 or £5,000 for somebody to get some good quality coaching to help them is way better than, there is a TV station, I shan't name them, that has almost like a volume discount at the Priory. They send so many people there. Now, that's not just alcohol, it's drugs as well. But the success rates are really, really low. And rehab, sending somebody to the Priory is going to come in at around about just over £1,000 a day. People are there for at least 4 weeks. That's an awful lot of money to then have it not work, inverted commas. Whereas we know that one-on-one coaching is much, much more effective. It's a fraction of the cost. So for a business to say, okay, let's look after you, get you the help you need, and get you back on your feet, that person's going to be super loyal to that company. And in the book, I sort of say, well, I was really well treated when I was off with breast cancer, which was ostensibly just one of those things and not my fault, as it were. Exactly the same should apply with alcohol. That person's going to be a really powerfully strong ambassador for that organisation if they're given some support. So to my mind, that's what good leaders should be doing. And there are people in so many organisations who have changed their relationship with alcohol and either don't drink at all or drink very moderately now, who could be doing that. So if any of you guys are listening, that's I think the way forward, to just destigmatize all of this. So yeah, it happens. It's okay. We got you.
Yeah.
And if for no other reason, it's good for business, right? I mean, we talked about all,
Yeah.
we talked about
gonna
all
pay
of the
back
we
tenfold.
talked about the impact in terms
Yeah.
of all the negative side, but we haven't even touched upon the huge performance and benefits that come from doing this. I mean, people are transformed. I mean, again, I won't steal your thunder. I'll let you talk about it, Tabbin, because I know it's your subject, but it's a huge performance upgrade.
Absolutely. Yeah. People, and you've not only got the loyalty, but if somebody is cutting out all those, hungover days, their productivity is so much higher. But if you think of how bad tempered I was when I was hungover, I was not a nice boss. I wasn't easy to work for or to work with. I made mistakes. I had to go back over stuff the following day. And make sure that I hadn't messed up. And so I was really not productive. I certainly wasn't creative and firing on all cylinders and having great ideas when I was hungover. It was a tick box exercise. So, the accuracy and the sort of the shine of my performance just wasn't there. So when you multiply that out across a lot of people on a lot of occasions across a year, you can see straight away that it's going to make a difference. But it also makes you somewhere where people want to work.
Yeah. Even if the revenue increase was like 1%, it was still,
that's huge.
Conservatively. If you have like a
Yeah.
1% increase to sleep, to motivation, to focus, to productivity, just 1%. What's that worth to your business?
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever know a number. You can't possibly even put a number on what's lost through this, because then you add in working from home, right? And the whole new ability to hide behind a hangover that offers, that's certainly come into place since COVID a lot more. And it's so true, isn't it? It's not always the big things, is it? It's not the sickness. It's that, like you're saying there, Tabbin, it's that, I'll just tick the box. I know I need to complete that by today. I'll do that, but I'm not going to put my all into it. I'm not going to, those great ideas are not coming. It's just, I'll get by. I'll do my job. I'll get the bills and go from there.
And also, if you work in an organisation where there is this sort of boozy sort of focus with the leadership team, it's like, well, the way to get on here is to go get pissed with them rather than to be brilliant. I won't be noticed if I'm coming up with great work. That's not really it's all about this, the cultural fit and that sort of stuff. So I think it leads to disenchantment, and it does make it harder for companies to retain good people. But I think there's also some just really bad practice, because if an employer has in mind that there may be people working in the organisation who are struggling with alcohol but haven't declared that they are, which is absolutely, we know that that's true. What impact does it have when a boss says, okay, Thursday night, everybody around the Fox and Pheasant, I'm paying? That person is struggling with alcohol, kind of, oh, shall I go? I'll go and I'll just drink Coke. Somebody hands them a pint, boom, the deed is done. And there's somebody who I used to work with, actually, and we worked for a big agency in London, and he was in client service. And at the end of the year, the client service teams were all asked to do everything they could to get in as much of the outstanding revenue as they could by year end. And the FD said there's a prize for whoever gets in the highest proportion of outstanding billings by the 31st of December. And this guy who I know won that prize. And within a day or two, he was handed a case of Chablis. Very nice. He was struggling hugely with alcohol. Nobody knew, and that set him back loads. That Chablis lasted a few days, and he was back drinking really heavily again. Now, it wasn't intentional on the agency's part to kind of railroad him, but that's what they did. So they caused him immense unhappiness and pain, and we know what that feels like, but also damaged their own productivity. There was a guy who was firing on all cylinders, and suddenly he wasn't. And things like giving alcohol as birthday presents, anniversary, it's your 5-year anniversary, here's some champagne. Why? You don't know whether I drink or not.
No.
And in my
It's
last,
quite lazy as well, isn't it?
Oh,
It's quite lazy.
yeah. My last agency, they during COVID, they were sending things. They were really good at keeping in touch and sending gifts and stuff. And somebody on the kind of like social team contacted me and said, we're going to be sending out hampers for Easter or something, which will include champagne. We know you don't drink. What would you prefer instead?
A car.
Rolex.
Yeah, I'll take the Rolex.
Well, I said, what I'd really prefer is that you don't send anybody champagne.
Yeah.
Because I know of at least 2 people who will be receiving this champagne who really, really do not want any alcohol in their house right now. And in fairness to them, they did rethink that one. And I've probably just outed myself, and everybody in the agency, cow, so I've only got one. But actually, sending booze, unless you know that person would welcome it and it wouldn't cause a problem, it's not an appropriate gift. And corporately, just get to know the person and do something different. It's...
Do you know? Can you ever guess what Steve got me for Christmas instead of a bottle of champagne? I love this.
A High Rocks ticket.
I'd love to see James at High Rocks.
I would as well.
No, I wouldn't actually, because most guys get their shirts off at High Rocks, so I'd pass in that one.
He got me a really nice bottle of extra virgin olive oil. Isn't that good?
Perfect.
How
That's
good's that?
really good. Yeah.
Brilliant, right? I didn't get Steve anything,
Yeah.
but he got me.
Didn't get me anything. You let that slip, didn't you?
Yeah. That was actually my idea, by the way.
It was your idea. It was your idea.
They did it, but I think honestly, that, joking aside, I think that's a really good gift, particularly if it's for people who actually, give a shit about their health.
Yeah.
Because you can get really nice, beautifully presented, well packaged, just like a bottle of champagne, but it's something that's actually, really super good for you. And yeah, it's great gift. I think good alternative. I think.
Yeah. My daughter is in the advertising business, and she has a client who she's very into fitness, and she and her client meet for a gym class first thing in the morning and then go and have some breakfast, which is great, and I love that.
Yeah, definitely.
But she's quite senior. She can kind of do it. She's confident. It's the people who've got sucked into, Alan Carr's sort of pitcher plant analogy, who are further down in that pitcher plant. Those are the ones that we should be worrying about, and we're not doing enough for, I think. Yeah. So.
Well, we've got a closing tradition on the podcast, Tab, and a question that we always ask everybody. And that's, if you were 18 years old again, but you were blessed with the knowledge that you have now about alcohol, would you do anything differently?
Oh yeah. I would just avoid it. Yeah.
From the get, so you'd never have drunk at all.
Well, by the time I was 18, I'd probably been drinking for 5 years.
Okay.
Let's be honest.
Maybe we should bring that down to like 15 or something.
Yeah. I think I would do that personal development work, because I had the bit I didn't mention was that I had a very, very troubled relationship with my mum, because she drank and I resented her for it and for all the consequences of it. And then I hated myself because I was doing exactly the same thing and turning into her. And that really, really wound me up. So there was a whole load of sort of personal development stuff that needed to happen in order for me to make a lasting change, I think. And I think if I had known what I know now at the age of 18, I would have been able to say to myself, do you know what? You are enough. You don't need to drink to fit in. You don't need to change who you are in order to numb these uncomfortable feelings. Get them out, sort them out, talk to people, you'll be okay. So, and I can't see that alcohol would have had a role to play if I'd had that wisdom then. Having said that, I kind of, sounds weird, I don't have any regrets. I was able to do this work and repair my relationship with my mum before she died. And although she never ever really discussed the work I was doing, and she knew obviously that I was coaching and I wasn't working in advertising anymore. But after she died, my middle brother was going to have her computer, which was a MacBook Air, and I said, well, I'll tidy it all up and get the latest software on it and stuff. And I discovered that my mum had never closed a window in the entire time she had a computer, as far as I could see. And the My Story page of my website, I must have closed that at least 100 times. She kept going back to it. And I'm okay with it now because that was quite a while ago. But at the time, I cried buckets when I realised that. I was so glad that I'd crafted it really carefully. And I hadn't mentioned her, and I just said I grew up in an environment where alcohol was normalised or something like that. I didn't say anything mean or, and I took the responsibilities all mine, obviously. I wasn't blaming anybody else. I was just saying this stuff did not serve me. But I like to believe that me writing that helped her change her relationship with alcohol. So I think that the thing that I wouldn't change is sharing the story. Now, I'm conscious, you guys will know, there are people who said, oh, we were an alcoholic then. And I'm sure there's gossip and bitching behind my back, but that doesn't bother me because I know that also people come up to me in parties and say, can you tell me how you did it? And I have a pile of Annie's book, and I just give it away. I buy them from Amazon, 20 at a time, and I just give them away. Because look, this is what helps me get going. Have a read. That may be enough for you. It may just, depends. Everybody's journeys are a bit different, but I'm here if you want more help or, signposting. I don't coach friends. I won't coach friends. So I send them to somebody else if they need a bit of, you think they'll benefit from some coaching. But I think that the more of us that share our stories, it's that vulnerability thing, isn't it? It's not very nice. The first few times you think, oh God, is everyone going to judge me and hate me? But actually they don't. And knowing that it can make a difference to somebody else makes it a worthwhile thing to do. Yeah. So I wouldn't actually change things if I, probably. I maybe would have, the penny might have dropped a bit earlier, but
yeah. I know that's a closing tradition question, but I think that has to be the loveliest answer we've had to that question. And that's really such a lovely way to wrap up. And it's been such a pleasure to meet you. I know yourself and James have met before, but it's been so lovely to have a conversation, and thank you for being so honest and sharing your story with us today. It's been fantastic.
Been a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Just before we wrap up quickly, Tabbin, if people want to find out more about your coaching, about your book, about your podcast, The Alcohol Debate, where can they where can they find more about you?
Okay, well, the business is called Wine to Water Coaching, winetowatercoaching.com. And I am actually about to probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks, a separate website for the corporate work. It'll be cross-referred, but and that's going to be called the Wellbeing Blind Spot.
Love that.
Yeah, nice, isn't it? Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Got that URL, and we're just working on the website and stuff. But at the moment, all the corporate stuff is referred to on wine to water coaching, but it just struck me they are slightly different audiences, and it felt a bit kind of muddled to have them both together. So
and what about your podcast?
The podcast is called The Alcohol Debate. It's on all platforms. You can get it on Spotify and Apple, etc. And it's weekly. So there'll soon be an episode on this issue of labelling with Dr. Erin Hobin. So we're recording that today. It's been one of those, sometimes I'm sure you guys find the same thing. You're somebody you really want, and it takes ages to be able to get them. So I'm really excited that we can have that conversation today. So
we look forward to that one.
Yeah.
We will put all of that in the show notes so that everybody
Brilliant.
can refer to
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.
So lovely to catch up.
Really nice to meet you, Steve, and to see you again, James. Thanks for
you
having
too.
me.
Thanks, Tabbin. Have a great week.
Thank you very much. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.